Here we are. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters and potential Toastmasters. Welcome to the show. This is Wake Up with Toastmasters. I am your District 115 Club Growth Director, Ken Richardson. And with me today is, as my host, is Distinguished Toastmaster, past District Governor, Phyllis Trimby. Good morning, Phyllis. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken, and welcome to all of our public out there. Thank you for tuning in. Send us a message. We are live. How are you doing today, Ken? Checking for messages, are we?
Yeah, making sure that our Facebook feed is up and running, and it appears to be so, and making sure that we can receive messages. So we are there. Now today, I think we have a topic that I really like. Some people may find a little dry, but we're going to talk about parliamentary procedure. So that means we're going to get into a discussion about Robert's Rules of Order. And this, I think, fits with the program that Jean Williams recently had on Wake Up on one of her days, was talking about effective meetings and things that make a meeting go well and have it be productive. So this kind of fits with some of that discussion. And I think a lot of people don't really, they've heard of Robert's Rules, they've heard of parliamentary procedures, particularly those who have been in business, who have attended a lot of meetings. But others, it's kind of mysterious or something that they really don't know a lot about. They've heard of it, but that's not something they're particularly interested in. And of course, we've been fortunate in the district for the past couple of years to have as our parliamentarian, Kay Collis, past district governor, past region advisor. And she has done a marvelous job leading us with, the proper procedure as we conduct our meetings. So what's your experience been with parliamentary procedure, Phyllis? You were a district director at one point, district governor back then. What has your experience been with using parliamentary procedures?
Well, all of my years in district leadership, we had Herb Nolan, and he took care of being sure that we did everything according to the rules. But people don't realize the reason we are in a meeting format is to learn those rules, how to conduct a meeting. Who speaks first? Is it the president? Who speaks second? Who takes the place of the president when they're not there? So we're learning all those things by going to Toastmaster meetings. It's kind of a sideline, but it's part of being in a club.
It absolutely is. And it's kind of what I think of as subtle learning when you really don't think about it. But today we're going to formalize it. And of course, I'm going to share my screen here.
I do it, a PowerPoint. What would our day be without Ken and his PowerPoint?
Well, it's so early in the morning and I've only had 2 cups of coffee. So if I don't have the PowerPoint, I'll wander off topic or something. So I got to have my PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Jennifer Smith has joined us. So Jennifer, if you have comments or questions about parliamentary procedures, please ask us. So let's kind of give a little background to start. This is Robert. Robert is famous for Robert's Rules, and Henry Robert is his full name. He lived from May 1837 through May 11th, very close there, 1923. He was a military officer, and he attended different types of meetings, and he noticed that for most of them, there was a lack of structure. So he observed legislative bodies and how they function. And then in 1875, he published Robert's Rules of Order. We just typically think of them now as Robert's Rules, and they are updated frequently. Have you ever looked at a copy of Robert's Rules?
No, never have seen one.
I have a copy on my bookshelf. It's about 400 pages or so. I think I have the 10th edition. I believe it's the 12th edition is now out, so it's updated frequently. And it is amazingly detailed. And if you were really to strictly follow every one of those rules, boy, you would have to have a certified, there is a group, the American Academy of Parliamentarians or something like that, that you can take courses in learning Robert's rules. There are over 80 motions that are defined in that book, but most groups only use a few of them. So let's take a look at why in the world do we need it in the first place? Well, I guess my first thing about this is to avoid chaos and bring order to meetings. Have you ever been to a meeting, Phyllis, where it's just kind of a free-for-all? There's no structure. The presiding officer really doesn't understand what he or she is supposed to be doing.
Well, when we get to be a small group, it seems that people speak out of turn. When there's a larger group or we're in person, people, follow the procedure, put their hand up if they want to be recognized to speak. But what I'm finding in the smaller meetings on Zoom, people have a tendency to speak up whenever they want to, which we allow just because we're small. Because doesn't have the chaos effect that it would if you had, say, 20 people who were all trying to get their opinion in. So.
Yeah, and it can be quite a mess. I mean, I'm on a couple of different boards for some nonprofit organizations I belong to. And if we didn't use Robert's rules, if we didn't have the structure, the order, we would never get anything done. So bring order to meetings, ensure that everyone's right to be heard is protected. In one association I'm with, for example, after the meeting is called to order and we have a quorum, which means the minimum number of folks you need to take action, to vote, usually a simple majority, then there's an opportunity for everyone to speak. They're limited to no more than 3 minutes, but that gives everyone a voice. So the purpose, in addition to bring meetings to order, is to ensure that everyone's rights are observed. Ensure that proper procedures are indeed followed, and make sure something gets done. I mean, I've been at meetings that are so chaotic and poorly managed that the business of the meeting is never accomplished. And that can be disastrous. Even if you're in a nonprofit organization, you have business that you need to accomplish, you have to get something done. So some of the principles that I want to point out today in parliamentary law. First of all, the votes of all members are counted equally. The president's vote is no more valuable than any other members. Now, sometimes what the president does with that vote can be important, because if it's a tie, for example, he or she can vote to break that tie. And that would, because a tie defeats a motion. So they do have that, but everyone's vote counts equally. People who aren't there and members that have a minority position, they also have rights. They have the right to be heard and be part of the discussion as well. Everyone has a right to free and fair debate. And one of the things that I don't think we talk enough about in Toastmasters is how to conduct a debate. In the old legacy program, and I haven't looked, I admit, on Pathways to see if there's something similar. There was a whole book on how to conduct a debate. And that's actually a very good way to change things up in your meetings, is have a debate. We did this in my club, Early Risers. We solicited topics, we put all those topics in a hat, and then somebody drew out the topic, and then we drew for who was going to be pro and who was going to be con. And that was a great meeting. Even though we want to hear everyone and we want free and fair debate, it is majority rule. The majority determines whatever the threshold might be. They have the right to decide the outcome. Again, the purpose is to facilitate the transaction of business. Now, there are some general rules for meetings, and some of these may not always be obvious, but in general, there are several that we would all like to follow or should follow. First of all, create an agenda and then follow it. If you're having a meeting without an agenda, you're inviting chaos. Again, unless it's a very small group. I mean, I have been in very small meetings, as you pointed out, that we didn't have an agenda, and we had our target was to discuss a given issue or what have you. But that's a little bit different. In general, you always want to create and distribute in advance, hopefully, an agenda and then stick to it. Excuse me. Have you ever been in a meeting, Phyllis, where everybody's talking at once?
Haven't we all? And it's like, you've got to put down the rules, call the meeting to order. There has to be a leader, someone that says, discussion is done. Let's go according to the agenda. When we get to that subject, each person will talk in turn, will be recognized by the leader. We cannot discuss everything because we're having cross subjects going on and arguments between one or two people or three people. Everybody has their own opinion. So it has to be the leader to call it to order, follow the agenda, ask for discussion, and recognize one person at a time.
And one subject at a time. If you are trying to address multiple subjects simultaneously, it's just going to create more confusion. Another general rule is to speak only on that current issue. Introduce the subject that should be obvious from the agenda. Focus on that issue until it's been disposed of properly, either approved or whatever it might be, and we'll talk about how that's done. And then focus on that so that something gets accomplished. You should speak only when recognized by the chair. If everyone talks at once, or the person who screams the loudest is the one who gets heard, that's not a good way to conduct a meeting. Using parliamentary procedure, you should only speak when the chair says, okay, I recognize Miss Phyllis Tribby, or I recognize the congressman from Nevada, or whatever it might be. Once the chair recognizes you, that's your opportunity to speak, and everyone else has to listen. Then it's their turn. So speak only when recognized. And then address questions and comments to the chair. The chair or presiding officer, same thing, is the focus of how the process moves forward. If you're questioning someone sitting next to you, you're not going to move the meeting forward or the issue forward. You must address your comments to the chair. Now, continuing on, you must give members a chance to speak. We're going to talk about how a motion is introduced and what happens and the proper procedure for that in Robert's rules. But you got to give members a chance to speak. They need to be heard. You want to decide issues in a way that is systematic, so things don't get dropped. So that means someone will make a motion to adopt a position. It will be seconded. There will be a discussion, and then the body will vote. That is the proper procedure. I move that we take X action. Someone seconds it. We have a discussion. After a period of time, discussion ends, and we vote. No personal attacks allowed. If you read Robert's rules, it is extremely formal in how it's constructed. And it's designed that way intentionally. Meetings are serious events. The goal is to get something done properly. If you are attacking your whoever's presenting the issue, if you're making it personal, that's not going to be productive. That's going to lead to a bad feeling for everyone, and it's going to really inhibit your ability to move the business of the group forward. No name calling, interrupting, shouting, or profanity. And I don't know about you, Phyllis, but I've been in a few meetings where things got ugly. People could not agree, and instead of discussing that rationally, emotions got the better of them, and it just resulted in a shouting match. Do you have a technique when you've presided? Have you ever presided over a meeting like that? And what do you do?
Absolutely. I had somebody shouting at me when I was the presiding officer, and she was a friend, and I found it difficult to believe that this was happening. But you've just got to keep your voice on an even keel, convince them that this will be handled. Calm, relax. We will handle this. Please sit down. We will handle this. You just got to keep with the even tone, calming and relaxing, that you're going to handle whatever it is that the problem is. There's no use of shouting at me. I can't do anything. Please, sit down, keep calm. I'm going to handle this. And that's it. That's all I know is you just got to keep calm, relaxed, even though you're shaking inside, relaxed, and tell them you're going to handle it. You can take care of this, but this needs to stop.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. You can bang the gavel and call for order, but you do have to show that you are calm, you are in control of this meeting, and that you are going to address those concerns. You, in this instance, means you are the presiding officer. That's the member of the group who is charged with conducting the meeting. It's usually the president who chairs or conducts the meeting. It's that person who is responsible for making sure that the rules are observed. And as you noted, we have had in our district meetings a parliamentarian who helps to make sure that we stay on track, and that's always so helpful. The presiding officer can introduce emotion and participate in the debate. However, when they do, there are some caveats here. They typically will relinquish the chair. This is what I was talking about earlier when I said it's very formal if you actually read it. But let's say I'm presiding officer and I want to participate in the debate, then I would formally relinquish the chair and assign it to the vice chair of the meeting or whoever, so that I could, in fact, participate. I got that on my next point. Relinquishes the chair and then retakes the chair. Oftentimes, particularly in larger groups, you'll notice that the presiding officer is relatively quiet, monitoring the process, not getting involved, letting the members have their say, and then later will may or may not vote, depending on what needs to happen. He or she votes typically only to break a tie or to change an outcome. Now, in smaller groups, this level of formality is not often followed, as you probably know from experience, but that's what's in Robert's Rule. And that's what I say. It's so, if you ever get a chance to read some of it, it is extremely formal in its processes.
And how many pages is that?
Oh, it's hundreds. It's hundreds. I mean, it's so minutely detailed. And I have to confess, I have not read the entire book. I have read sections of it. It's pretty dry. I've read sections of it so that I can understand. But for example, as I mentioned, there's like something around 80 motions described in Robert's Rules. However, in real life, you probably use a third or less of that. And you'll recognize, we're going to talk about some of the common motions here, but a motion is a formal proposal by a member that the organization take a particular action. So it will be very specific. It would cover who, what, when, how much money is involved. So for example, if you have on your agenda, we're going to discuss a contract with the Hampton Inn for holding our district meeting at that facility. The motion might be, I move that we accept the contract proposed by the Hampton Inn. That would be seconded. There would be discussion. Discussion would end, and then a vote would be taken. So a main motion brings business before the assembly. And it can only happen if there's no other question pending at the time. Remember, I talked about one thing at a time, focus on one issue at a time. That's why you can't make a motion before the assembly unless everything is clear, we're ready to discuss this topic one at a time. Oh, there it is, over 80 motions, but only a third or less are commonly used. So here's some types of motions. The main motion, a privileged motion, we'll look at these in a moment, a subsidiary motion, an incidental motion, and then there are two special motions, one to rescind a previous action or to reconsider. And a lot of these, again, are not the things that we use typically on a regular basis. The main motion, as I mentioned, introduces the subject for consideration. I move that we accept the contract with so-and-so. A subsidiary motion is made to change the main motion and must be considered before that motion. So if the main motion is I move to accept a contract with the Hampton Inn, a subsidiary might say, I move we amend the motion to limit the contract with the Hampton Inn to no more than $5,000 or whatever some amount might be. So the body votes first on the subsidiary motion, that's the motion to amend, and then on the main motion. A privileged motion raises a special matter, and it can be taken sort of out of order. It's not really related. But let's say, for example, the meeting is running late. You could get a motion to adjourn, and then that must be addressed because it is a privileged motion. An incidental, that's a procedural point of order, suspend the rules. It also is considered as it arises so that you take care of it and move it out of the way. Reconsider allows items to be brought back for review. Or rescind. Very unusual to rescind a motion that it was previously adopted. It basically cancels the previous action of the body. And as I've mentioned here on the slide, it requires 2/3 affirmative vote to pass. So those are the main types of motions. Did you realize, Phyllis, that all of this was part of Robert's rules?
I suppose in the back of my mind, I knew that this was Robert's rules, but I never really thought about it. It's just the procedure that we use. And as I say, as a Toastmaster in a club group or area division, we follow these as much as possible.
Yes, we do. And that's why I emphasize again that they are the guidance that most deliberative bodies, most meetings follow, more or less to a certain degree. Some are more formal than other, and I've sort of brought all of this to the fore to see that. Now we're going to go through a main motion, then we'll wrap up so people can see how this happens. First, a member is recognized by the chair. If I'm the chair, I'll say, I'm going to recognize Ms. Tribby. Ms. Tribby is going to make a motion that we take a specific action. Another member who need not be recognized simply says, I second the motion. And then the chair places the motion before the group, restates the motion. So here's the motion before the group and initiates the discussion. The members debate on it. Typically we'll say, the chair will say, do I have someone who'd like to speak in favor of this motion? That person speaks. And then you go, do I have someone who'd like to speak against this particular motion? And you can see it's very formal, very deliberative, the way it's written in the book. Meetings don't always end that way, but that's the way that Robert envisioned it. Very formal, back and forth, for the debate. And then at some point, the chair asks if the assembly is ready to vote. Okay, we've been discussing this for X amount of time. We allocated 5 minutes. We are 4 minutes and 32 seconds. Are we ready to close discussion and take a vote? And then the motion is put to a vote, and the chair counts the affirmative votes and the negative votes. We have, depending on how you do it, you could have the ayes and the nays. You could have individual vote, and you see this if you've ever watched C-SPAN, which I highly recommend if you're an insomniac. You can easily go to sleep watching C-SPAN because you're watching Congress, and that process is sometimes painfully slow. But you've heard, no doubt, well, let's take a roll call vote. And this is when, for example, the body wants to very carefully document how each member voted, that kind of thing. Sometimes the voice vote is sufficient, all yay or nay, and it's clear the yays have it, the nays have it, or whatever it might be. But the chair would announce the affirmative, the motion carries, that kind of thing. And so the chair announces that. So some of the common motions, I know we've got a few minutes left here. Let me just real quickly go over these. A motion to table. Now, people think that a motion to table gets rid of the issue. It does not. It temporarily puts the issue aside, but it must be brought up fairly soon. It doesn't get rid of it. If you want to get rid of something, you would make a motion to postpone indefinitely. A motion to amend is used to change the main motion. We talked about that as a subsidiary motion. Call the question is used to end debate, and that typically requires a 2/3 vote. So you're ending the discussion, call the question. The majority is actually a super majority. Here you're talking about 66% instead of a simple majority to end the debate. And then refer to committee. That's one of my favorites. If you can't get a solution, send it to the committee. So real briefly here, abstentions. Members have a right to abstain under parliamentary law, and they should on occasions where there might be a conflict. If they have a conflict of interest, then they should abstain. However, the majority still rules, and people don't realize this. They have in their mind, when I've talked to folks, that an abstention is a no vote. It's not. It's neutral. So let me give you an example. Let's say we have 30 members of the body in attendance. That's a quorum. So 7 members vote in favor of a motion and 5 opposed, but 18 abstain. Well, those 18, this is kind of made up, obviously, that's a rather large number. But the point I wanted to make in this example is those abstentions are not votes pro or con. They are taken completely out of the equation. So in this example, because 7 members of those who did vote, the majority of those who did vote, who did not abstain, the motion would carry. So you can see how abstentions can really skew an issue, and you hope that you don't have this kind of situation. Usually the governing documents of the organization require a majority of members present to vote unless they have a compelling reason. Well, that gives us what I think is a great overview, because I put it together, it has to be, of parliamentary procedures. What are your thoughts, Phyllis? Did you realize how complex Robert's rules can be?
You know, I never thought of point of order as I've done it many times when the meeting was not going according to procedure, especially at contests where the Toastmaster maybe was going to interview one of the contestants that would be in the next contest. So I've done that several times, but I never thought of it as a motion. You know, you do what you've seen done in the past what the procedure is, and if nobody's doing it, then you have to take, and do this point of order. But that was one of the things that I never thought about as being a motion.
Well, in many organizations that I've belonged to over the years, the rules of the meeting tend to develop organically. Many of them are absolutely based on Robert's rules,
Yes.
but people don't always realize that. They don't go back to that source document because it's laborious to read. Trust me, it gets a little dry. But what you see is the development of common procedures that are usually considered to be within the range of acceptability when it comes to Robert's rules. It's when you have a dispute that you then need your parliamentarian to say, hey, on page 89 of this 600 page or whatever it is, this is what we must follow.
Yes.
And when you have a presentation like you and I discussion that we've done today, you begin to see where a lot of our meeting habits come from, that they are based in a systematic review of how meetings should be conducted. And you can see that people, not just Robert, but everyone who followed him, who saw this as a good thing for conducting business, how they've added to it and adopted to it over the year. Well, we are we're a little over time, a couple of minutes. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with
I
our
was just
audience?
going to say, one of the things we did not discuss would be the election of officers and having a slate of officers. And I found that you have to ask 3 times, are there any additional nominations? And people look at you kind of strange when you say it 3 times, but it's in the rules. And so in that procedure, we do it.
Well, there you go. That just gives us a topic for another day, is to talk about election of officers and how that happens. And then we can follow up on some of the things that Gene Williams started with regard to particular types of meetings and some of the things that you might want to cover, for example, in a club's executive committee meeting. But that's all for today. We've run out of time. I want to thank you, Phyllis, as always. I want to thank our audience and remind everyone that Wake Up with Toastmasters is on Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. If you'd like to be a guest or you have any comments, please send me an email, d115cgd@gmail.com. I will see you again next week. Tomorrow, of course, our program quality director, Gene Williams, and her co-host, Jean Dunford, will be here with Wake Up with Toastmasters. This Saturday is our educational enhancement night. So we will have classes. If you need any information, send me an email. They will go from 6 to 8 p.m. and they will include the ever-present new member orientation and an introduction to pathways. And there will be several other classes that you may be interested in. So have a good day, everybody. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again on Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.